Hi everyone, the Ask Mike Show. We are back. Mike here as your host, as always. And today I'm joined with Will Crewdson in the virtual studio. So, Will, thanks for being a guest.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks for having me. Yeah, great to be here.
No problem. And you're a guitarist. You do a lot of solo stuff through Scant and amongst the other sort of collaborations as well. But I'm curious as to your starting point. So was guitar something that you did when you were in school, growing up? Talk to us a bit about your origin story.
Yeah, I started playing the guitar when I was 9, so I was still in school. Yeah, and I was actually I had a classical teacher for years, for about 5 or 6 years. So I did all the classical grades and all that. So yeah, I started off doing that, but I always wanted to be in a band, really. And when I got old enough to be able to do what I wanted, I did that. I formed my own band, and I've just been doing it ever since, really.
That's something that you've always been doing from an early age then. So what was the desire behind it? Was it just you got better and then the natural progression was the band and then you sort of took things gradually higher and higher? Or was there a bit more to it? Were you inspired by someone? Did you have someone you looked up to? Or was it just a case of I'll do this guitar thing and see how it goes, and it actually went quite well?
Probably a bit of all that, really. There's always people you look up to, people that inspire you, people that are doing what you want to do when you're older. So there was a number of bands that I looked up to and guitarists or whatever. But yeah, no, I always wanted to. It's just what I always wanted to do, really. And like you say, it built up over the years, and every sort of new thing I did kind of got a bit more successful. So yeah, it worked out well.
So what was the first song that you came up with, if you can remember, and talk us through a bit about how you came up with it? Because very often the first time we do something, it's either the most nerve-wracking or it's not. But
Yeah.
I'm really curious to do what it's like for you.
First song, it wasn't that nerve-wracking writing a song. It was nerve-wracking going on stage and playing it for the first time, I would say. But actually writing the first song I wrote, pretty much, if I listen to it now, I can see exactly where I got the inspiration from, and it was probably The Cure, actually, the band The Cure, because the riff was very similar to an early Cure song. But obviously the words are all my own, and yeah. So no, it wasn't really that intimidating to write songs. It's pretty gratifying straight away. If you actually create something of your own, it's always a good feeling, really.
What was the time difference between creating the song and then performing it on stage, and what was it like to go from having the song there and then going out on stage and performing it?
Well, actually, I think what happened was I wrote it for myself, and I was going to sing it and everything. But by the time I'd got a band together, I actually had a singer in the band, and I was just playing guitar. So I used to write all the lyrics and the music for that singer. So it wasn't actually. It ended up being a song that someone else was singing, but I was obviously involved because I was playing guitar. But so yeah, it just kind of, and that would have been probably at least a year after I wrote it, I would have thought. Yeah.
Was it a particular style of guitar that you started playing? Because I'm aware that there are different types of guitar and like bass guitar and things like that. So was there anything that was particularly sort of, I guess, unique to you or your preference?
Well, as I say, I was initially doing classical music, so I had a classical guitar with nylon strings, and I played with my fingers with my right hand. I moved on. I did actually have a bass at one point as well, quite early on. I had a whole bass stack in the front room. My parents were very, I don't know, very cool about that. And I even had a drum kit at one point. I just went through every instrument you could possibly have in a band. But then in the end, I ended up getting an electric guitar, and that's what I've stuck with ever since, pretty much. Yeah.
You brought up your your parents being okay with it.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories around like practicing at home that you'd be able to share, or was it more like studio stuff for you when you were getting started?
Oh no, it was all at home. I was still at school. So I had to practice every day pretty much when I was doing classical guitar because, like I say, I did all the exams and all that, so I had to make sure I was proficient to get to the next level and all that. So yeah, no, it was all at home, and there was no problem with noise for some reason. But then as soon as I would play one of my records, a record that I bought by someone, there was always a problem with noise then. If it wasn't me making the noise, that it became a problem for some reason. That's the way it goes, though, isn't it?
I guess you sort of sat there and gone, well, it's school work, so we'll let it go a little.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get away with it. So I suppose that's good, really, to be able to make a noise without any repercussions. Yeah.
Yeah, must have been pretty cool as a kid being able to do that and go, but it's schoolwork, Mum.
Yeah.
I'm preparing for an exam.
Exactly.
So what makes the songs more difficult as you got older? What was now looking back, it's probably easier to answer this question than when you were a child as well. So what makes a song more complicated or more difficult to actually perform?
It depends. Sometimes very simple songs are actually harder to get right or to get, sounding as good as even more complicated. When you've got a lot of notes happening, you can kind of almost hide behind, if you play a wrong note, it's going to be less noticeable because you're going to get onto the next note a lot quicker. If there's a very basic riff or basic melody to something, I think it takes a lot of experience to get that right, I think, and I probably listening to some of my earlier songs, they're probably more complicated than some of the stuff I do now, really, because you kind of learn to use a bit more space and a bit more directness, I guess. Yeah.
I was just curious because I was never amazing at music. I wasn't amazing at a lot of things, to be fair, when I was growing up. It always interested me when, like, music, you've got levels and grades and things. I'm sort of aware of that situation, but I'd never known what the difference was between an easier song and then graduating to harder songs.
Yeah, I suppose, in a way, I suppose you get better at playing stuff anyway. So it may feel like it's getting easier, but I guess it could be a more complicated thing that would have been complicated a few years previous, so maybe it's that. I don't know. It does depend on the song. Sometimes you'll hear something and you'll think it sounds like a song by someone else. You'll think it's very simple, and then you'll realize they're using a lot more chords and a lot more sort of variations on a theme and a lot more complex arrangements than actually you initially perceive from listening to it. So that's the great thing about music. It's almost like magic. You can if you dissect it, it kind of almost spoils it sometimes. It depends on the person as well. So some people may find certain songs harder to play than other people. It's very subjective, really. Yeah.
It's almost like if a magician reveals the trick and you're praying it's something magical and complicated, and you go, no, it's just this thing that I do with mirrors and a coin, and you go,
yeah,
doing the whole thing, really.
That's
I'm kind of hoping for something isn't.
That's a really good analogy. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like.
So how did things really start to get going for you? Because it can seem a little bit strange to people when they go, oh, well, they just started playing in school and decided to start a band. But you've gone from like something that some people do as a hobby, and you've taken it to a point where you're on stage, you're touring, you're playing guitar for a lot of different bands and things over the years as well. What led up to it starting to take off for you?
It didn't take off right away. I was doing a few normal jobs for a few years, before I joined a band called Rachel Stamp, and I was 25 when we got signed, 24, 25. So yeah, right from when I left college, I was in a few bands that didn't really get anywhere, but I think that was good to kind of, you have to sort of learn your trade, it's good to kind of do that without being in front of a massive audience. So luckily that's what happened. I didn't feel lucky about it at the time, obviously, because I just wanted to get somewhere and go on tour and all that. But that didn't happen until I was in my mid-20s.
There's nothing quite like failing in front of millions of people that you thought you were well prepared for, I suppose.
Yeah, well, yeah, luckily that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. What was the defining moment? Did you have one where you sat there or you stood there and gone, "This is it. It looks like it's starting," Or did it never feel that way because you'd worked so hard to get there?
When I joined Rachel Stamp, we got signed to Warner's. When that happens, then you realise you're going to get, you're going to be able to live on music. You get a wage and everything. That obviously alters the way you're kind of feeling about what you do. So I think it was probably then, that was the point, really. So like mid-20s.
That's really cool then, because when people picture music and entertainment, and Warner Brothers is up there with, like, you wouldn't even dream of it in some cases, because I don't even think that they even did music or even got involved in music. So how did you get that opportunity? Did you have to, was it right place, right time? Or did you have particular things that you had to do to get noticed? It's almost like in football, let's say, you're more likely to get scouted, in inverted commas, if you're seen in the right places. So if you're like an A-League player in the right tournament at the right time, you're more likely to get scouted by a bigger team, where you could not be in that position and you're never going to get there. So talk to us a bit about that situation.
Yeah, I think it's probably a mixture of everything you said. It was, obviously, you're lucky to be in the right place. We'd only played about 4 or 5 gigs, but someone from Warner's had come to see us. But yeah, we were going out a lot. We were very visible. We were quite a flamboyant looking band anyway, so that helped. But the songs were great. The original demos we did were, a lot of people picked up on them. A lot of independent companies did as well. But I think when at that point in time, as soon as the major labels, as soon as they hear that a lot of smaller companies are interested, their ears prick up, and they get in there with the big bucks or whatever, So, but it's a very different scene these days. This was in the 90s, when it was like there were a lot of bands getting signed, and there was a lot more money around to nurture bands as well, So I guess we were fortunate to be around then. But having said that, it wasn't really the best part of the career of that band. It was everything kind of happened after that. We got a lot bigger after we lost our deal with Warner Brothers, and we had a lot of smaller deals and stuff. But we actually had more of a following then. So but it was great at the time. Yeah,
I imagine that felt quite surreal. Actually, what was going through your mind? Like, what sort of things were going through your head, and how did you feel when you got that?
Well, I think every young band, if they get money thrown at them, they're just like, well, this is it. We've made it. It's like they're behind us, and we're going to have a hit and all this. And of course, it doesn't always work that way. It doesn't mean you've made it just because you got a record deal. So and in our case, it really didn't. And it really, not that we were the biggest band in the world after that, but we did on our own kind of steam. We gained a following, like I say. So yeah, but it was very exciting. Yeah, very exciting.
What did you learn from getting signed with Warner Brothers then, that you took into doing things on your own steam, as you said, that propelled you forwards, because it would have been so easy to go, oh, well, this is it.
I think, well, we didn't sign another major deal after that because I think we realized we needed to have someone that was a bit more hands-on, a bit more aware of what was going on, because that, you know, if you start dealing with major labels, they've got 10 other bands. They're, you know, even one A&R person has got 10 other bands they're trying to deal with. And, you know, in our case, it wasn't that lucky because the A&R guy that signed us actually left pretty soon after he signed us, even before he released anything. So that didn't help matters. So it was by no means an ideal situation.
That's quite a difficult situation to be in when the guy that organized you guys to do some work for them ended up leaving not long after.
Yeah.
You put everything forward. That must have been quite nerve-wracking for you as the band as well. Like, what were your thoughts at the time? I mean, I don't know how far back we're going now, but what sort of things did you? I mean, were you looking for your next move? Were you thinking, well, he's gone, I take it we're going to be next. We've not even released anything yet. Let's look for our next thing. Or were you still trying to sort of get as much as you could from it?
Oh, we were definitely trying to get as much as we could from it. And we were doing loads of gigs at the time, touring. You know, obviously when you got a major label behind you, you have everything sorted as far as tour support goes. So you have a proper crew and you can travel everywhere. Okay. So we were just happy that we were able to do that, really. Yeah, I guess in the back of our minds, it was a bummer, you know, that the guy had left. But on the other hand, you try and be positive because you just try and make the best use of the situation you're in. And the situation we were in was working with other people at the company and trying to get them excited in our music as well, you know. So yeah, you just get on with it, really. And yeah, it was all new to all of us, you know. So and in that way, it was quite exciting. So we just got on with it.
When you think about stressful situations and being nervous and dealing with the situation, some people will turn to like certain coping mechanisms, you know, whether they start meditating or they start reading or they start exercising, or, you know, whether slightly more unhealthy spectrum, you've got like alcohol and drugs and all those things just to deal with what's going on in between the years, so to speak. But you mentioned that you just got on with doing your thing and making the music, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, well, we were quite young, so obviously we were all going out a lot anyway and stuff. And
yeah,
but no, we did. I can't remember meditating over it for very long.
I can't imagine a lot of time.
Maybe these days I would, but yeah,
I can't imagine they gave you a lot of time to really process it. Like, right, you've signed, get you going.
No, exactly. Yeah, you just find yourself in that position. You just make the best of it.
Yeah. So when you started the solo aspect of it, you sounded very much like you started collaborating with a lot of other bands and other singers. And when I was doing a bit of research into yourself, I think you can see where this is going. I noticed that you did some work with people like Tom Jones and Celine Dion. Now, before we dove on live, so hello to the listeners. Before we got onto the live element of it, you didn't really have a lot of communication with Celine, but do you have anything interesting to share with us about your experience working with Tom?
Yeah, he was really cool. Did a lot of rehearsing with him, and we did loads of TV stuff. Didn't actually play live with him, but we were supposed to, but that didn't happen for some reason. So yeah, I spent a lot of time with him rehearsing. I can remember talking to him. The only thing I can remember talking to him about at any length was the length of my guitar strap, because he was very impressed that I had my guitar so low. And I remember he likened it to the guitarist from the Alex Harvey band,
right?
Who he was aware of. Yeah, so I can't remember the name of the guitarist now, but he said, well, he was the first guy that did that had it really low, you know. And I said, what, really? I said, before Jimmy Page or whatever. And he goes, oh yeah, before Jimmy Page. So that was actually really interesting. So it's weird, and that's weird. It's one of those things that you, I guess, gets passed down. That style of playing where your guitar's pretty low, and you never really sort of give it too much thought as to who originally did that. But he actually sort of said that to me, and that was pretty cool. Yeah,
I love
it was cool.
the impression as well that you attempted before.
Did I?
Yeah, a little.
I didn't even notice.
A little bit. Yeah.
I could do a bit of a Welsh accent, but yeah. Good old Tom.
Good old Tom.
I actually saw him a couple of years ago in Australia as well. He was doing this festival that I was playing with another band at. Yeah, and he said hello and stuff, so that was cool because I hadn't seen him for a while.
You got a hello from Tom. That's amazing. Just imagine getting a hello from Tom. That'd be pretty cool. So talk to us a bit about the solo side then, because there's a lot of it that I imagine caused it to happen that way. But then looking back over the chat that we've had, you've been doing some solo stuff anyway. So what was the transition like? And did you still do group stuff and solo stuff together? What was the story behind that?
Well, I started doing solo stuff. It's probably about 9 years ago, and it was actually at a period in my career where I wasn't in any band at all. I just left a band, and I'd been thinking about doing it for years, but I'd always been sort of waylaid by being in other bands, really, and playing with other people. So it just came at that point where I didn't have anything else going on, and I just thought, well, obviously now's the time to start doing it. So I just started recording at home and around at friends' places, and then started playing gigs on my own, and that's the way I've done it since then. Really, pretty much. I just get on stage and do it. Plug in. I use backing tracks and stuff. Yeah.
This is going to be a complete segue. Do you use a loop pedal at all? Because I see a lot of people doing it to sort of create the tracks, loop them, and then play their own thing on top of it. Is how I, with my very, very low level of music knowledge.
A lot of people are doing that. Yeah.
Is that something that you do as well?
No, I've never owned a loop pedal. I do everything. I produce everything at home, everything that I play over, because I kind of I like to keep the backing completely electronic, and have the guitar be the only kind of, well, apart from when I sing, which is not on every track, but mostly it's just the guitar, which is the kind of organic aspect to Scant regard. So I don't really like layering guitars live. Fair enough if that's the way you want to do it, but that's not really what I do with this.
I imagine everyone having their own unique style and things that they like, and a lot of other artists have commented on how sort of personal it is, whether it's how they perform, what their strategy is for creating music, what their process is. It's all very self-indulgent, I guess, because there's so many different ways that you can do it. I'm picturing hundreds of different ways. The only way to pick one is to pick one that works for you. So what's your own particular process for creating? Because you said that a lot of the background stuff is electronic. You record it at home, so then you don't have to. I imagine you got less of a worry, I suppose, when you are performing. What's the creative process like for you?
It can come from anywhere. It can come from an idea of a beat or a groove, or it can come from a guitar riff, or even a vocal melody, or a lyric even. So it's all different. With every track could come in a different way. Could have been started in a different way. Yeah.
So what's the point where you know what the process is then? Do you have an apple on the head moment and you go, ooh, that sounds like, but then you might have a moment where the process might be totally different. So do you have a way of recognizing like how the song is going to be created before you do it?
Well, like I say, it's different with every song, but it's yeah, it depends, and that's different as well. Sometimes you will get a eureka moment, I suppose, where you're thinking, "Oh, this is all," and that could happen completely by chance as well. It could be the elements you put together of different sounds, uh, which they might not work on their own, but you put them together and they kind of work together and become something worth pursuing. So yeah, that happens quite a lot.
It's just really interesting how people do have very different processes,
Mm,
and I've always been curious about it because I do a lot of creative stuff as well, similar to what the podcast is, and very often it can be quite tiring when the process isn't the same all the time. When I write something, just as an example, when I write something, I can have a day when I can write
mm,
thousands of words in a day, and I don't notice it, I don't feel it, it doesn't feel like a struggle. The hands just move and words appear on the
yeah,
page. Sometimes I forget to eat,
yeah,
right? I can get that
yeah,
way
yeah,
when I forget to eat. And then I have days when it's like, oh my God, I'm never going to get this done. I'm never going
yeah,
to write it. It's going to be horrible.
yeah,
I'm going to have to force myself through it. And it took a while for me to accept that while it feels differently to me, the actual writing itself might not be a whole lot different.
mm,
Like, if someone was to read it, they might not be able to tell the difference between like a more like flowing type thing where the words just appear
yeah,
versus the words that I have to force myself to write.
absolutely.
Someone reading it might not actually know the difference.
Yeah.
But how would you deal with the not knowing how this is going to go? Because I like how it's experimental. Probably in your case, you throw
Yeah.
things together and it can sound great, and then you go, okay, well, what about this and what about that? Is it you have a foundation that you build on, or do you literally just sit there and go, don't know how this is going to go, but it'll probably end up okay at the end either way?
Yeah. With this scant regard stuff, it's kind of the foundation is normally the easy part because that's if I come up with a few chord changes and variations on a theme, I can kind of put that down quite quickly and program drums and stuff like that. But it's all the kind of like they say the devil's in the details, isn't it? So it's all the kind of little kind of bits you have to tweak once you've got all the basic ideas down. That's where all the hard work is really, and that's where I kind of have to get obsessed. And I know what you mean when you say when you have to force yourself. It's a very different feeling from when it's flowing naturally. That's a good observation, and it's that happens a lot with music. But I find when it's just like you just get into a habit, and I end up like I just did this album, and the only way I could finish it was I had to be obsessed with it. I had to be literally like I couldn't walk in the room without doing this, without changing that, without. So that's the only way it got done, really. Otherwise, it's kind of probably not even worth putting out anyway. If you haven't spent that time and put that effort into it, I think so. It all makes sense. It all makes sense. All the hard work, I think, to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've never had a moment when you've accepted the fact that you are probably going to have
Mm.
to drag yourself through it. And do you ever sort of sit there and go, it's going to be one of those days, but then at the end of that day, you go, it was still worth pushing through. And then do you ever have a day where it doesn't feel like it was worth pushing through it?
Sometimes, but then you might get a day like that, and then you'll fire it up the next day and think, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought. So it might be because you're tired. It might be because you just listened to something too many times, and just tried to ram it into your head to get done. and then that's when you need a bit of space, and then, like, so you just need to sleep on it, and the next day it'll be like, oh, okay, actually I can do this. And if there's bits you need to change, it might be a bit more obvious, when you've had a bit of distance from it.
One of the things that I have been, I guess, eager to ask as well is, like, with some creative projects, you can refine it to the point where you're doing it for no reason. And you can get to a point where you're making changes upon changes upon changes and structure changes. I use book as an example because that's mine. But you can get to a point where you're just changing all the time. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it can be. It can. I mean, that's the problem. Is like you have to know when to stop as well. You have to know when to take a step back and say, "Hang on, you're just going too far." Yeah. So yeah, that does happen quite a lot, actually.
It's almost like learning about yourself and anticipating when that starts to happen, and then convince yourself that enough's enough. It's probably the best it's ever going to be. And
yeah.
I know for myself, it was like, well, you're never really going to know how amazing it is until it's put out there. You only get to do so much without the external.
Absolutely. And you have to realize that everyone's got a different perception of everything. Every human is different. So it's the way you look at something is never going to be the same way anyone else is going to look at it. And that can be for good or bad. There might be something that you've sort of thrown away. It might be a bit throwaway. You haven't even thought about it much, and someone will get something really deep out of it. Which is just great. That's the beauty of perception, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah.
What do you tell yourself before you decide that a song is as good as it's ever going to be?
What do I tell myself? I tell myself, well, normally to go to bed, because it's normally like taking all night to get to that point, So, like I say, I do think that's the best thing sometimes, just to listen to something on a brand new day.
I like the phrase, listen to something on a brand new day. I quite like that, because that can be relevant to a lot of different things. Like solving problems, or finishing arguments if you've ever had an argument, or finding a solution to something, or whatever it is. Very often it's about looking at it and approaching it with fresh new eyes. So I really like how you, or in your case, ears, it's good how you phrase that as well, because I think so many people try to get it done when they're not in the best state to finish it, whether they're tired, they're worried, anxious, they've spent too long on it in one stint, so they've become so obsessed with the way it used to sound or used to be when they first sat down, and it constantly sort of forces them into that little box. But what things do you do to help avoid that? Do you have any particular rituals or routines, like morning routines or something, that help keep you as creative as possible for the longest amount of time?
Not sure really. I just, like I say, when I am really rolling, I do get obsessed, and that's all I'm doing. So I'm not even, I'd like to say I'll just go away and watch a film or something, but I don't really, my mind is so in it that I can't do that. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing really. But it's just the way it works for me, so I don't really have any set thing that I would do to get over that. I think, probably the best thing to do is, especially if you're doing an album, you just move on to another track, and then go back to that one that was becoming a bit over the top and problematic. I think that's normally what I do, really. Yeah, just go back to stuff.
Multi-tracking, very interesting.
Yeah.
Normally multitasking, Will, but
it's all multitasking, isn't
it? Multi-tracking. Very, very cool. So share a bit about the band then, and what sort of work that you're up to, and how can people find out more about you?
Well, scantregard.com is my website, and that's got all details about me and all the people I've worked with, and it's got all my music, all my solo music, and links to my other bands. So yeah, scantregard.com is the place to go, really.
Will, thanks for being a guest. Those of you that
thanks.
Those of you that have tuned in, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any of our other shows. And Will, I look forward to keeping in touch.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on. Cheers.